It's time for Lefties Losing It. And what I'm about to show you is, I've got to say, a little bit sad. I know we have a laugh on this segment, but sometimes the dysfunction, the hate, the cowardice of the modern left is, well, a little depressing. Even a leftist as blessed as Hollywood actor Jerry O'Connell, good-looking, rich, successful, but utterly divorced from reality. First, let's look at him establish his Democrat credentials.
I went to a Kamala Harris rally. My wife and I donated to the campaign.
Oof.
And Megan Thee Stallion played. And that was pretty epic, Bill, if you were there. I mean, it really invigorated, like, excitement, you know?
It really invigorated the people who are already going to vote for her anyway. That's who invigorated.
Now, I'm about to show you the sad part. This rich, attractive, successful dude has failed as a man. His own family, his wife and daughters physically attacked him on election night for not being sufficiently pro-Kamala. Watch how terrified he is at the prospect of speaking his mind. He's self-censoring and being so pitifully weak that even fellow lefty Bill Maher has to have a go at him.
And I'll be honest with you, I didn't think Trump was going to win. I live in California. I didn't think he was going to win. From what I was hearing.
I didn't either.
I think he was going to win.
No,
this is where I live, you know?
Yeah.
I said something along the lines of, like, there was no planning, this is what they get, there should have been a primary. I said something along those lines, you know? Like, I was just spitballing ideas as to, it was a shock, you know? My wife and daughters, without saying anything, became physical with me. They were filled with rage. So if I am being careful with you in how I say things, yes, I live in California. I live with not one, not two, but three people who, if I made any kind of joke, they'd become very angry with me, you know? So
I don't want to tell you how to live your life, but I couldn't live that way. I would, whatever household or whatever situation I'm in, I say what I truly think, and if it makes you angry, I'm sorry, we'll have to work that out.
Well, it makes...
But I am not going to tuck my tail between my legs and just shut the up. This is what you were dealing with when you were a child. Just sit there and don't say anything.
Just pitiful. Weak. Now, let's check in on an awful, that's an affluent white female leftist who has delusions of victimhood.
I have less rights than I did when he became president. And I shouldn't have less rights than I used to. I shouldn't have different rights than my husband has in 50 states. I shouldn't have to provide a plethora of other documentation to get an ID because I got married, because I've changed my name. It's just chipping away at us little by little until we don't realize we're all cooked.
There you have it. Republicans have it in for marriage now, apparently. They're coming for married women. Yeah, right. Now, this is the opposite of an awful. Here we have a brave, principled, logical British woman, Connie Shaw, who clearly has endless reserves of patience. Watch this. She tries and tries again to get some sense from a trans activist holding a union banner.
Do you support a woman if she was going through the fact that she'd been assaulted in a single-sex space by a male person? No, you wouldn't help a woman who was a member of your union if she had been raped in a single-sex space for women by a man.
Trans women are women.
Even if they rape other women?
Trans women are women.
Even rapists?
Women commit crimes.
But
trans women are women.
Was Isla Bryson a woman?
Trans women are women.
And what makes them women?
Trans women are women.
And you've got no explanation for what makes them women?
Is it in the word? Is it in the name?
Well, I'm looking for a definition, not a circular argument.
Trans women are women.
Do you see how that's a circular definition? Would you like to explain why trans women are women?
That's all they have. Projection, empty words and circular arguments. Watch now as this coward has other activists come in to physically obstruct Connie Shaw from asking any more uncomfortable questions.
Trans rights are human rights.
What about women's rights to single-sex spaces?
Trans rights are human rights.
So you don't believe that women have the right to get unchanged away from the presence of men?
Now to a man who should be awarded the Pulitzer Prize, if media awards actually meant anything these days. Here is Nick Shirley, who blew apart the depths of fraud in Minnesota, concentrated in the Somali community. Well, Nick Shirley's in LA now, and the scale of the fraud there is even worse. What he saw in LA is incredible. Here he is at what looks like a former motel, which is allegedly running 30 fake hospice businesses.
We have Angels of Valley Hospice. We have Angels of Haven, Angels of Peace, Light of Angels. Yet the BMWs, one right here, one right there, 2 brand new Mercedes over there. It just is unbelievable the amount of money that these people are making, and they're not even trying to hide it.
And while in Minnesota we had fake daycare centres that had no children enrolled, in LA, he found children in daycare centres, but there were no adults around.
Talk to the adult.
He's not here.
Not here.
Yeah.
So you guys all by yourself?
Yeah. Knock on the door.
No one's here.
No one is here. No one is not here.
Okay, so you guys are all by yourself?
Okay. I can see by myself.
Yeah, okay, that's concerning.
That is concerning. Let's bring in Newsweek's senior editor-at-large, Josh Hammer. Josh, tell me about this focus on LA now, on California in general. Surely it can't be as diabolical as what we saw in Minnesota.
Well, it's quite bad. I mean, envision, Rita, Minnesota on steroids. That's basically what California is. California is essentially democratic governance on steroids. It's been that way for a very long time. Unfortunately, it's reached something of a low point under Gavin Newsom. I guess we'll see if it can get even lower in a future Democrat gubernatorial administration in Sacramento. Far be from me to predict that, but I frankly probably could get even worse than this. It centers around Medicare and Medicaid fraud. That's why Dr. Oz, the former television star who's now the head of the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, he's been at the formal administrative center of exposing a lot of these issues out in Los Angeles County. According to the receipts, Los Angeles County, California is single-handedly responsible for somewhere between 15 and 20%, if memory serves, of the Medicare-related quote-unquote payments in America, which doesn't actually make sense. It's a large county, but it's only one county. So yes. The administration is starting to expose some of this fraud. Nick Shirley and others are on the ground trying to expose more of this. Shirley continues to do a lot of really solid investigative work when it comes to this. He's basically just showing up with a camera, Rita. It's really not exactly the work that you need a PhD in filmmaking to do. It's really kind of just very entrepreneurial type stuff there. My hat off to him for doing this, and we'll see where it goes, I guess.
Josh, let's hear from Dr. Mehmet Oz. You mentioned him. He is President Trump's administrator for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Service. Here is what he had to say about fraud in LA.
$100 million. You get the national numbers that you just highlighted. You have states, red and blue, who are suffering because the rules were lax and weak, and folks, fraudsters, took advantage of them. But we're on to them, and we're going after not just autism, which is, of course, a heinous way to steal money from the American taxpayer, but we're also going in for home health care that's unnecessary, hospice care. John, California has 1/3 of, forget Los Angeles. The city of Los Angeles, the county around it, is 1/3 of all hospice centers in the entire country. Is everyone dying in Los Angeles? These are impossible numbers.
That's what you were talking about, Josh, and they do seem like impossible numbers. How can LA alone have 1/3 of all the hospice centers in the entire country?
Yeah, so that's shocking even to me, Rhea. I actually had not heard that exact statistic about 1/3 of hospice centers. I mean, what I had seen is 15 to 20% of autism-related centers, things like that there. I mean, 1/3 of look, LA is a big city. It has a declining population, actually, and in fact, it's probably going to decline even more. It probably will get surpassed, actually. It's the nation's second largest city if current trends hold by a place like a Phoenix, Arizona, or Houston, Texas, potentially in the next 10, 15 years or so. We'll see how that goes. But there are a lot of people in LA, but No, there are not 1/3 of older people who need hospice. That is facially absurd. And the median American looks at that and starts scratching his or her head and says, this cannot possibly be right. What on earth happened here? And what happened here is that these blue jurisdictions at best turn a blind eye to rampant fraud, to rampant welfare fraud, the very welfare that the Democratic Party has institutionally, structurally put in place in America going back to the Lyndon Johnson Great Society in the 1960s, and many programs have been built on top of that since then there. So they started the welfare state, and now they are bilking the federal taxpayer via the welfare state. It's something that they've been doing for a very, very long time. And I guess one of the many benefits of having this current administration in power is that they are no longer actually turning a blind eye to it. Personally, Rita, what I would like to know is I would like to know the extent to which the Biden administration in particular was complicit in this. Were they aiding and abetting this? Surely Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is a Californian herself, let's not forget there. She has a very long relationship with Gavin Newsom there. I would be curious to know, what did Kamala Harris know about this fraud in Los Angeles County, and when did she know it? That would be at the top of my list of questions.
And you've got Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom, the frontrunners for the Democratic presidential candidacy in 2028. I mean, that is the best they have at the moment. And just have a look at California to see how well that's going. Now, I saw a piece you wrote for the LA Times, a fantastic piece on what victory would look like for the US in the Iran war. Tell me why you see this war as fitting the America First agenda, and when and how can the Trump administration exit this conflict?
Sure. So this war is not something that came by surprise. There are a lot of folks that are saying this is not what Donald Trump campaigned on. He campaigned on ending forever wars, and so he did. So he absolutely did. But the framing is off, Rita. I don't have to be the one to tell you that the Iranian regime has been at war with the United States and the West, but really above all, possibly the United States, for 47 years. How do I know that? Because they literally chanted every single day, because their very first act, the revolutionaries' very first act back in the Jimmy Carter presidency in 1979, was to storm the United States embassy. That was their first act. They held the Americans hostage for 444 days. They have not stopped killing Americans ever since then, from the Hezbollah Beirut barracks bombings back in 1983, all the way to the roadside IEDs in Iraq from Qasem Soleimani, until most recently, the attempt to assassinate Donald Trump on our own soil, for which a Pakistani national was actually just recently convicted here in federal court. So they've been doing this for a very, very, very long time. So the war has been waged against the United States, whether Americans think about it or whether we want to acknowledge it or not. The only difference is that Donald Trump is a man who is finally actually addressing this head on. He's not interested in kicking the can down the road like prior presidents have been doing for 47 years and counting there. Now, he's not going to drag this on forever. It's not going to be an interminable Iraq or Afghanistan-like conflict. He has no interest in trying to sculpt a Jeffersonian or Lockean liberal democracy there in Iran. Rather, the goal of Operation Epic Fury, from an American national interest, therefore a MAGA America First perspective, the goal here is to neutralize the Islamic Republic of Iran as a threat to the United States and our interests. We've already come a pretty far way on that. The task is not yet completed there. But that is the goal on its own terms. When that goal has been met, and it's admittedly a debate as to exactly how to judge that goal, but when that goal is met, this operation can be finished. Now, the ideal situation, the ideal goal, of course, is for the United States and our Israeli allies to lay the conditions for the Iranian people to take matters into their own hands and to actually make sure that this most horrific of regimes goes to the hellish ash heap of history where it so richly belongs there. But while that is the ideal scenario, that is not necessarily the strict necessary criteria, in my estimation, for this operation succeeding on its own terms. The operation, from our perspective here in the U.S., is a success when the nation of Iran is no longer a threat to the United States. Ideally, that's regime change, but I think it's at least theoretically possible for something slightly less than that. I'm thinking here along the lines of the Venezuela model, where you have a Delcy Rodriguez type figure, someone who is technically on paper of the regime, but he or she is basically just doing the biddings of the United States in reality.
If that doesn't happen, if the regime manages to hold on for weeks, months, and we've got the midterms looming, how will that factor into the equation? Because this is a conflict you would think the president would like to wrap up well before the midterms?
It's a great question, and I think certainly Republicans would prefer that this war be wound up sooner rather than later. I think no one wants to head into August, September, October with a months-long campaign in the Middle East front and center for voters. The big question, Rita, comes to the price of oil. What is going to happen here when it comes to oil? Energy is kind of the mother's milk of prices more generally. If you buy any goods, if you purchase food at the supermarket, it's all downstream of energy because those goods were transported there on tankers, on airplanes, on trucks. It literally all comes from energy. So wherever the oil markets are, I think is going to be the number one factor here. And oil has spiked. It hasn't spiked quite as much as people, I think, in many ways thought it would, because America is now the world's number one exporter, actually, of oil and natural gas. So let's see what happens with the Strait of Hormuz. And I guess Trump's message to our NATO, quote unquote, allies is pretty clear, which is you guys should help us. You guys should help us secure the Strait of Hormuz, which is this 21-mile choke point that Iran controls there. Make sure the energy flows there. Frankly, he could say to Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, and these guys there, you guys should care about the price of gas just like we should. Guess what? We all drive cars. We all fly on planes there. So it's Trump thus far has not apparently been able to convince our very feckless, weak-minded European quote-unquote allies to join us on this particular mission. But God willing, Rita, that'll get done. And I think any midterm implications will be assuaged if that happens.
Now, a top counterterrorism official, Joe Kent, has resigned over the war with Iran. He claims that Israel has misled President Donald Trump into this conflict. But Josh, despite claims that the war is splitting MAGA, the polls say otherwise. Here is CNN.
Sometimes you look at the polling data and there are numbers that just jump off the screen at you. And this is one of those. Because just take a look here. MAGA GOP view of Trump. Approve 100%. 100%. If you are a member of MAGA in the GOP, you approve of Donald John Trump. 0% say that they disapprove. You don't have to be a mathematical genius to know you can't go higher than 100%. He is the 1972 Miami Dolphins.
Oh, gosh, I love seeing those poll numbers on CNN of all places. But we keep hearing about the MAGA base being split, the America First agenda being in tatters, and Republicans being upset with the president. But the polling is fairly consistent, and that one is pretty emphatic, Josh.
Yeah, the polling is very consistent. So that's the thumbs up, thumbs down when it comes to MAGA approval of Donald Trump. The polling on the specific Iran operation, Rita, among self-described MAGA Republicans is pretty unanimous across the board as well. Anywhere between 80% and 90% of MAGA Republicans support President Trump's crusade against the Iranian regime. This is really not a matter of doubt. Now, you would think that it is a matter of some question listening to people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, and unfortunately these days increasingly Megyn Kelly as well. And it's just not the case. It is simply not true that this is a matter of debate among self-identified MAGA Republicans, which of course raised the question as to why there are some podcasters like the ones I just mentioned who want to make it seem like there is a very lively debate. And perhaps that's a conversation for another day. In my estimation, Rita, it comes to 2028 and attempting to define what the American right looks like post-Donald Trump. But for now, I think we can say to Joe Kent, who resigned this week, good freaking riddance, because as Donald Trump himself said at the Oval Office when he was asked by a reporter, if you don't consider Iran a threat to the United States, you should not be working for the United States government, period, full stop, end of story. In fact, Joe Kent ran to Tucker Carlson's show immediately, very predictable, of course, to give his very first post-resignation interview. And in this interview, he actually, I was shocked to see this, he actually said that the Iranian regime, many years ago, issued a fatwa, so a Shiite Islamic ruling, saying that the Islamic regime there cannot, under Islamic law, ever get nuclear weapons, which he never did. This is literally pro-Tehran agitprop that's been disseminated across Western media for decades, but he fell for this hook, line, and sinker. This was the former director of the Counterterrorism Center within the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. So the relevant question, Rita, we should be asking here is, how the heck did this guy get his job in the first place? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Josh Hammer, thank you so much for your time tonight.
You bet. Thanks, Rita.